Aloha. I'm Stuart K. Hayashi, and I'm recording from Hawaii. And this is a new show I'm doing. I interview people who are up and coming in the area of entrepreneurship or science or technology or invention. And today our guest is Jennifer Dawe. She's joining us all the way from Calgary, Canada, and she's a video game developer. And we're going to ask her about that. So, can you say hi to the audience?
Hi.
So, your organization is Happy UFO.
Yeah.
That's your company?
Right. Yeah, that's me.
And I take it from Twitter that you're an artist. You draw a lot of characters.
Yeah, that's most of my job now is basically character design with some other aspects like scripting, programming, those kinds of things.
And your current big project is Seedscape.
That's with Dapper Swine, but yeah, we're co-creators on that. He's the main developer, and it's a project I came on to, so like that project belongs to Dapper Swine. But yeah, we're basically we duo on that one.
So someone else started Seedscape and you came on your second in command there?
Yeah, basically. Jason Brown is the person who started it when it was just a little seed pod in his eye, basically.
And is this a game where you, a survival game where you're a character and you sort of cultivate plants for your survival?
Yeah, it's basically like an open world cross between Harvest Moon, Link to the Past, and like Animal Crossing is probably an appropriate cross between all of them.
And this is a PC game.
Yeah. We're developing for PC first, and you know, if we decide later it's feasible to port it over, we'll do that. I don't Jason and I don't really like the whole, you know, just make it all the same for everything, and you know, then you're hamstringing your performance on PC, so it'll be on a console and that kind of thing. We're just kind of going, so it's, if we end up on console, we'll cut out things that need to be cut out then, not just have a hamstrung game for everyone, basically.
So I remember from your interview with Kate and Bacon Man on their show Downloadable Content that you've been involved in video games for a long time. So when did you first become acquainted with video games, even as a player?
My family lived in the middle of the Arctic, and my dad was pretty much going bonkers without access to things. So my dad actually moved up north to get paid better because we didn't have a whole lot, and that was a way in Canada to make more money, was to say, hey, I'll go up north and work, and you know, they help you with rent and stuff if you're willing to live there. So my dad did that, and you know, but at the same time it kind of started to drive him a little bit crazy because there was not that much to do. We lived in a town of less than 1,000 people, so there was one guy who was a PC retailer. Like, he special ordered these things in from out there, so my dad saved up and bought us this computer. And it's so funny because like normally the main model came with like 1 meg, and he was like, no, I want 5. And people were like, oh, people will never need 5 megabytes for a computer, that's ridiculous. And yeah, so he basically bought it and got a bunch of games, and I was about 4, and that's when I basically decided I was going to marry a computer when I grew up. So but yeah, I've been gaming since I was 4 years old, and it was actually very important to my family because they weren't sure. Um, they didn't know at the time, but like I was having trouble connecting with other people, and I had a form of autism, so my parents didn't know I could read really well, and they didn't know that I could, that I knew really what was going on. So they knew that I was smart. They just didn't know that like I could do things. So they were like, wow, when they would put me in front of the point and click adventure games even at like 4, and I could solve them. So they were really surprised by that, and I think they had a little bit more hope than when I was really young and just kind of aloof. So gaming's been a really important part of my life, and I've always seen it as a communication tool. So it's just I basically either make stuff for games or play games pretty much every day. So
Oh, I have to admit, you're a PC gamer. I have to admit, I come from the other side. When I was a little boy, I would go to this video arcade called Fun Factory. It's a chain, and all the cabinet games were lined up, and I was enthralled. And that's when I first became acquainted with video games. And then I started playing games. The first one I actually played was in television, which was sort of a copy of Atari.
right.
And then I moved on to Sega Master System, the 8-bit one. Seems not many people had that. And I also played, of course, 8-bit Nintendo. So I'm a lowly console peasant.
See, I've never had that attitude. I still love consoles because as soon as the internet came around, I liked consoles as a way to say, okay, you know what? I don't want to be bothered with messages. I just want to go into my room, shut the door, and play a game, right? So I'm not one of those people that's like, oh my God, bad console time. The one thing that I don't like is the multi-platform process where they're basically just like, well, we're not going to push this game to its boundaries because then it won't work on consoles. And I totally get that because like they've basically proven now if you port stuff over, you'll basically double the amount of money you make. So I totally get that, but at the same time it's kind of like with Seedscape, Jason and I just really felt that there's already enough of those games on console. So let's really push this for PC, and then we'll see after that. But the PC is basically the main market because we don't have that much competition either. Like there's some games and they're all really, really great and everything, but there's still a lot to be filled out in that category for those types of games.
Are there any particular games from your childhood that had big impact on you that you look back fondly on to this day?
Oh yeah, there's lots of them. Like I would say one of the first games that actually made me interested in consoles was stuff like Star Tropics and Adventure Island and Mario 2, which was supposed to be another game, but it didn't turn out that way. But yeah, like those were the kind of the games that got me interested in consoles. And as far as influence on my design, I mean, I really, for sprites, I think Illusion of Gaia was one of the games that really showed me just how nice, and same as Secret of Mana, it's just like they showed me how nice, sprite art could be. Because at first it was always like, I'm a little blob and I'm kind of jumping around and it's not really that, interactive. But then when you started getting like the 16-bit era, it was like, wow, this is something that I think is timeless. And people argued with me for years after Final Fantasy VII came. They said that 2D was never going to come back. Nobody was going to want it anymore. Quit your job and learn 3D modeling. And at the time, I was not a very good 3D modeler. Jason and I were actually part of the same milkshake community, and we didn't know each other then, but like I was just so bad at 3D modeling back then. I just didn't get it. I've gotten a lot better, but 2D was just where it was at for me. I'm starting to kind of combine the two now, but I really love the bouncy, happy 2D sprites that that we've got in Steedscape, and I think it really is one of my better works as far as sprite art goes. Like we just kind of went a little bit crazy with everything. Like even the trees are kind of split up into their own sprites, and their trunk is like its own little piece, kind of like Legos. You don't really get to see that much in the game, but that's how much detail I went to, is that if you could see it, you would see that the trunks and of the trees are actually sections and things like that.
So it was in playing Illusion of Gaia and Secret of Mana when that was when you had your epiphany and realized this is something I want to do. I want to have a career making games like this. Was that
I
it?
wasn't sure about a career so much, because I actually, one of my big interests was biology and medical research and things like that. That's actually one of the main things I wanted to do, and games were always kind of like a, you know, a lofty dream, maybe someday kind of thing, but I had never expected to get into video games. I just kind of did. A lot of when I was about 18, 19, web games were just starting to kind of get really popular. Like there was a lot of, you know, Flash stuff and everything, but um people weren't really making a living necessarily off of that kind of stuff. It wasn't, there were so many compatibility issues, you know, and then stuff like Newgrounds comes around, and Newgrounds just kind of really helped a lot of people make a living with web games, even though lots of people complain about it, but in reality, there were very few web portals like that that people could actually put games on and get something back out of it. Like getting a sponsorship was like a really big deal. um, but it wasn't until I used to mod on Furcadia, so I was scripting and doing pixel art there too. But I wasn't really like, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna do this and I'm gonna be rich and famous and have, you know, have, you know, servants and things. I was just kind of like, yeah, it'd be kind of nice, but I won't get my hopes up kind of thing. And then I ended up kind of just like finding a bunch of other people that were like, oh hey, we're all in college, and you know, we're doing this thing, and you know, you can just work on it while you're in college. And it was like great experience for, because I was doing multimedia communications, so it was just really good experience. And then it was just like, I actually was like, had that moment where I was like, why don't you guys do this could totally make money if you did this. And they were just like, that's not gonna make any money, you know, that doesn't work. I'm like, okay, just let me try it. And then I did, and it was like, it was crazy. Like the people were willing to help out the game in exchange for like little costumes and stuff. And yes, I'm one of those horrible people that first came up with microtransactions. I'm sorry for what they've become, but um relatively speaking, if you were a free game that didn't have, you know, much advertising budget or anything like that, offering little cosmetic items were a great way to get noticed. And you know, you could get people to play your game for free and pay for your server costs and all that. And all we were really expecting was to pay our server costs, which at the time, like you could not get a server for less than 500 a month. So I mean, that was very costly for college kids to be taking on themselves. We did it for a while, but yeah, we started to pay for our own costs with on the server with these little cosmetic items, and it was great. But you know, I totally understand why people are kind of getting upset with them now. Like I played the new theme park on mobile, and I was like, I felt like crying. I felt like crying because I was just like, I love this game and I have no way to pay. I would have paid $20 on mobile to just have that game be unlocked, but you couldn't. You had to pay. You have to pay for each, what is it called? Pay not to wait. That's what it is. And it's just so sad that like we can't, like people are completely against that model now because of stuff like that.
For those who don't know, what does modding mean?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, like it depends on who you talk to, but basically just some games release toolkits and some don't, so people reverse engineer. But for Katia was actually really cool with it, and they released their own things and said, hey, here's how you make new graphics and stuff like that, and you can set up your own worlds. They were called dreams, and you could basically reskin the whole map and make it look like something else. I made mine look like a school.
Modding means
And
modifying the game. Means that you can
right.
and make changes to the game, your own version of it.
Right, that's a better way of putting it. See, modding has become so diluted now, where it's just like when people say, oh, don't do this, this is a mod, and I'm like, okay, but what about this thing? And it's like, it's just gotten so big now, and with official tools, I don't even know if you can really call it that anymore. It's just kind of like adding user content, but some people still consider it modding. I'm just kind of like, well, you're kind of getting out of the realm there, but yeah.
So do people in the gaming industry, I mean the players and the developers, do they understand copyright law very well?
No, that's kind of a big problem right now, as people have been seeing over the past couple days. The gaming industry for the longest time has run on a lot of kindness and non-enforcement, because most of us just don't want to be jerks, but like it's kind of confused people onto what is legal and what's not. And the thing with copyright is it's kind of like living in a neighborhood. You've got some good neighbors and you've got some bad neighbors. You've got some neighbors that are going to try to move the property line or steal things from your yard in the middle of the night, and people are trying to push you out and things like that. And you've got people who trade cookie recipes, and I think we're kind of treating everyone like they're a thief in the night, and it's a bit sad, because I think this recent event kind of showed that, and I had to explain to a few people.
Can you tell us what you see?
Oh, the Skyrim modding debacle. That was I was dealing with that for 3 days. It was I don't know. I feel bad because I think that some people took what I was saying the wrong way about it, because I totally understand, like, you can't go into a 4 years established modding community and just rip that apart and expect it to go well. I was defending the concept separate from that, and I think a lot of people got the impression that I was like, no, I don't get you. But the thing is a lot of oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're being a copyright bully.
Yeah, like, and most people are not. It was just, people are like, well, what about this and making money off of other people's work and fees, and like, IP is a complex machine, and for the most part, I found that, developers and modders in most communities have a lot of mutual respect for one another. Like, they kind of keep you on your toes. But there's also some people that just are like, no, just because you made this thing doesn't mean it belongs to you. I don't care. I do what I want, and it's like an episode of Maury Povich with like the out of control, teens. But and it's sad because like I've had IP issues with people like flat out ripping my work off, and I'm like, I didn't immediately even knew about it. And I was like, hey, I appreciate that you love my work. I will give you some tips to change your work to make it a little bit more legal, but let's be clear here, you're way out of bounds. Like, and one thing I was like, this is 10 years old. Can you at least make it better? Like, I made this when I was a teenager. If you're going to steal it, make it look better. And we even have little jokes in the industry, like, how to steal like an artist, because everyone's inspired by everyone, right? Like, and most of us understand that. And it's when people, you really have to be trying, like, you really, like, the basis of everything is you can't make money off of somebody else's thing without their permission. That's the basic. And like, you can, there are it, and but the reality is it comes down to intent. Are you to take and from it without even so much as, you know, a, hey, can I do this? You know, if you don't feel comfortable contacting the person who made it about it, you're not really having the best intentions. And like, we've had people contact us being like, hey, you know, can I make a t-shirt? And we work something out. And normally, you know, I'm like, you know, you better impress me for that to happen. But at the same time, I'm not like a jerk about it. I'm like, oh, hey, I do like this. Let's work out a license. Here's a piece of paper signed. Now you're legal. We both benefit from this, the end. But people want their cake and eat it too. They want to not be able to contact the person who made something and still benefit from it. And it's just like, I understand, like, you know, because the problem here is like there have been bigger companies that really bullied people with stuff, and that was not cool. You know, like the Eisner days of Disney were not pleasant, and even Disney has apologized for a lot of that. But a lot of people don't realize that, because people are like, well, likeness, right? Likeness, they're going to get you on likeness, and it's like most of those lawsuits have failed. And yes, they're horrible that they are making people waste money defending on something like that, but the courts have kind of started to push back against that stuff, and that's what we really need to pressure for, is to say, like, if you go after someone for likeness, you better be prepared to pay that person's legal fees if you're wrong. So those are the kinds of things that need to happen, because we shouldn't have to worry that, like, you've got a mouse that has ears slightly too big and you're going to end up in court, right? Like, that's what people are worried about. But that's not most of us, and it's especially not game developers. We're kind of a lot more, because I mean, like, the difference really is, like, let's look at Binding of Isaac. Binding of Isaac is basically Link to the Past with everything but the dungeons ripped out, right? It's a roguelike with Link to that. That's fine. He's not using anything that would hurt somebody else. And even if he was really close, like, we put parody items of other people's games and they're all in games all the time. Like, everybody does that. It's just kind of a commonly accepted thing. And a lot of those things are policed with etiquette. They're not like, we don't go, I'm going to sue you if you make a game. It's just kind of like, hey, man, you know, like, if you're going to use something similar, at least make it distinct enough that it's like, haha, that's funny, but you're not trying to hurt someone. I
But
like,
yeah,
most people don't even go after most things. Like, we just don't care enough.
yeah, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. Sometimes I'm talking about the premise of a story I'm writing, and then someone says, "Gee, you shouldn't go around telling people the premise of your story. You know, they might steal it." And then,
Oh,
and I tell them, you know, that actually the premise of a story is not copyrightable. You know,
right, exactly.
the exact text. If someone copies the exact text of my book, you know, verbatim, that is grounds for a lawsuit. Likewise, if they copy it, a lot of it, and change just a few words or every other word, but it's basically the same, that's also copyright infringement. But the basic copying someone's argument, especially if you cite the person who originally made the argument, is not an offense. Same thing with copying the premise of a story. So people can copy the premise of Lord of the Rings. They can copy the premise of Superman. And if the names are different, you know, the names of the characters are different things happen, you know, details are different. It's not something they can, it's not something that the content owner can sue over and win plausibly.
Right. And the thing is like, when people are like, oh, but they can sue you, it's like, I can sue you for looking at me funny too. It doesn't mean most people are going to do that. You know, like, you can basically file a lawsuit for almost anything. You know, it doesn't mean that you're going to win, and you're in that danger anyway. You're in that danger driving a car. So it's just kind of like to people kind of throw out that, you know, artists a lot of us don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of ways to protect ourselves, and we don't have a whole lot of things to, you know, say, hey, I made this and this is my livelihood. You know, don't shut down my business, you know, so you can make your own, you know. And that's kind of where I like to, because people are like, well, it's not the same thing as property. I'm like, you're right. Your house doesn't expire. You know, your house ownership doesn't expire. It doesn't matter. You can pass it to 100 members of your family. It doesn't matter. It doesn't expire. And I do understand copyrights expiring because they aren't exactly the same. People that want to be like, the minute you die, it becomes everyone's. And I'm like, okay, but that gives you kind of like, you know, putting out hits on people, copyright, like, oh, this person's copyright will be up if they're dead. Now I'm just gonna go have them killed. And like, that is giving companies incentives to kill people too. I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous thing, but people think that people think that certain things have consequences and certain other things don't. It's like, no, everything has a consequence. And when we try to apply consequences disproportionately to people because we're afraid of big companies, you end up hurting the people that are the most benefiting, you know, which is people who are small companies and people who are employed by companies that have, you know, large IPs. It's just like, I mean, Disney's kind of in hot water again over the visa thing, but at the same time, it's like, that doesn't mean every other company who is protecting their employees with that as well as themselves, you know, should just be thrown out. Like, no, you guys, you're done. You know, I just, my attitude, I don't know, like, I always liked looking at other people's fan art growing up, but at the same time, I would like get to a point where I'm like, why do some people only draw fan art? Because like, wouldn't you love to create your own things and, you know, eventually benefit off of those? And people are just like, that's a weird concept to some people. And I'm just like, you know, if you base your whole business around somebody else's artwork, you're tied to that person and not in a good way. So when people are like, oh, well, I need this to expire so I can make a living, it's like, you don't need that. I mean, I understand, like, I submit stuff to the public domain all the time. I like doing it. I like submitting, you know, textures and graphics and things like that for other people to use. But I also have things that, you know, are my livelihood and I do protect those, but I'm not a jerk about it. So I don't want to be punished like I'm a big company suing a preschool.
But you know, that reminds me about all this content you create. I noticed, so I've seen the cartoons you've put out on Twitter, and they're very cute. And I want to ask you, are there any specific artists who have influenced you, or any specific organizations that have influenced you? How did you develop your own style?
Despite me being kind of a PC person, I am really, really always enamored with art that, you know, the companies Nintendo tends to put out. So like you have things like, you know, Square Enix, the old Square Enix, Squaresoft and Enix separately. Um, I really like minimalism, like Earthbound and Spike McFang and things like that. I just really appreciate how hard it is to get down a nice shapely form in it with as few things as possible, but still have it look really nice. And I know I said before, like, you know, I really like Illusion of Gaia, but at the same time, Illusion of Gaia, if you look closely, it's really, it looks high resolution, but it's still very simple. So that's the kind of artwork I really appreciate. I was a big fan of for like digital painting goes, I was a big fan of the people who did Magna Carta, the Xbox game. I don't want to pronounce his name wrong. I think it's Hyung Tae Kim. Um, he's just, I really love his artwork. And there's just so many artists, but I'm just, I think it's more the technique I look at because I'm kind of like, I like developing new techniques for making art. So I think more about people's processes than I do them sometimes. So um, there was for a while there was a real backlash against people who used like high saturation color palettes and artwork. There's like, oh no, you know, the grayscale way is all the way, and I'm just like, I don't like that. um but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I could think of 10 artists today and then a different 10 artists tomorrow that I found inspiring.
Oh, I hope this doesn't sound horrible. I have to apologize ahead of time. When I see your characters, a lot of style reminds me of Sanrio, you know, the company
Oh
that.
yeah.
And
Oh
there's
no,
a
I have no, and that's another thing. That was actually what I was told, was one company I work for, they were like, I'm gonna hire you. It's like, and I'm like, and they're like, do you want to know why? And I'm like, that's a weird question. As they're like, because I think you're going to be the person that makes the next Hello Kitty. I'm like, okay, that's a compliment. But yeah, like I really do like designing characters that are very simple and everyone can enjoy it. And the thing is, another good thing about drawing simple characters is for other people drawing them and sharing them and making their own, you know, fan art and stuff like that. So that's part of what does carry artwork. So that's another part, that's another reason why it's like, I'm like, you know, don't be so, you know, afraid about, you know, the copyright stuff. I mean, if you have genuine intention, chances are the company is not going to be like, is not going to come there and, you know, to your house and beat you down with sticks. So um you just kind of got to have a good head on your shoulders about it and be humble, so to speak. I I do really like fan art people put out and stuff like that. And you know, if someone does a commission and you know it just happens to be of my artwork, I don't really care. Like I don't care about that stuff. Like that's just people practicing and making money and working their way up. And I do really like the idea of having, I actually tried to set up a game a couple years ago that was based, it was a forum community based entirely around people, you know, selling their artwork, like their clothing. They become like their own personal like fashion design RPG. But it that sounds really lame, but it's not like it was sort of like Gaia Online, but it was just very hard to and expensive to set up a system where people could contribute their own clothing and you know, different body parts and stuff like that. And to get that off the ground is just really, really difficult on your own because you really need that first wave of users to sign up and keep the community going. And that's kind of why I was a little bit sad about the Steam thing, because like there are communities that are out there. Like if you look at more of the girly modding communities, like Dolls and the Palace and you know Guy Online and stuff like that, like those people would love to have a community where they can all sell each other clothes and things like that. And you know, it's sad that people kind of can't see past their, you know, my one game tinted goggles to see that there are other communities that could benefit from it. Because there are already people paying for mods of their characters on Gaia Online. They just can't use them as their actual avatar. They have to put them in their signature, so to speak.
Well, who requires that? I mean, who imposes that rule?
Well, I mean, they just have no way to submit stuff to the game. Like when I was a pixel artist starting out, I mean, trying to get collaboration contracts was a nightmare. Like you're like, hey, here's my portfolio. I want to make clothes for this game. You know, because they would occasionally hire an artist to do a set of clothing, and then you would just be laid off after that set was done. And then, you know, that was it. But getting those contracts was a nightmare. So the concept of like artists being able to get a contract with a few clicks and let the free market basically decide if they want their artwork in the game, like that is something 2003 me would have really loved to have. And it's sad that we can't see past, you know, one game and we just kind of want to burn it all down. You know, because like getting your stuff into an already established IP and having like being on the level legally to do that, that is really good for somebody who, maybe they can't get a job in the industry yet. They're not good enough. That will push them to be good enough.
Who can't see past one game?
I don't know if I want to invite that invective, but just when the Skyrim thing happened, it was just every argument came back to Skyrim, and I'm like, guys, I get it. The Skyrim thing was dumb. That was not a game to pick with. I was like, but look at these other types of games. Look at I Move You and Second Life and the games that I tried to make. And think about those in terms of that system. Why can't we have that? Oh, that shouldn't be allowed. It's like, shouldn't be allowed. You don't care about those games. Are you going to play those games? Well, no, but it sets a precedent. Well, if that's the case, every other game sets a precedent for every other game. So where does that end?
So company that owns Skyrim, they didn't appreciate mods. They didn't appreciate fans.
No, they did. That was the thing. They even created tools for it. The problem is that they were like, after 4 years of kind of the community running their own team, they kind of pulled the rug out from under them and said, oh, hey, we're doing paid mods on Steam now. And there was like a mass exodus from their forums and just people stealing stuff and, uploading $1 swords that they didn't even own. And it was a mess. Like, you can't do that with a pre-established community.
So they changed the rules quite abruptly.
Yeah, and nobody had any idea that was coming. Like people were told privately that it was a possibility, but like the Skyrim thing just kind of like sideswiped everyone. Like people were like, "Whoa, you really picked that game for this system as your first game?"
So when it comes to the customers and the business, the producer of this content, there's a problem. There's sort of a blurred gray line in what the relationship is, because it's not just a matter of customers purchasing services or product. They
Right.
form a community, sort of like how lots of people take pride in having a Harley Davidson motorcycle. We have Harley Davidson clubs, and if relations between the company like Harley Davidson and the customers go sour, that spills over into the community.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's kind of like it was like your favorite coffee shop. You were there yesterday, then you come in the next day and suddenly your coffee shop is a Starbucks and the friendly atmosphere you had is gone and suddenly it's $7 for a drink and you're just really confused. So it's, you can't do that to people because I mean with modding you're dealing with creative people and people who spend a lot of time for free putting into something. Though I do think that there is the alternative to that, which is some people actually realize that some people got a lot of sales their first day and they realized they could genuinely make a living with it, and that was taken away from them. So we have to consider that too. But like I said, it wasn't the right game to begin with, so that part I guess doesn't matter as much.
No, I think I understand. I mean, a lot of times I do art or I write stories and I share them with people quite freely. But there's this other part of me that thinks I would really like to monetize this. You see, so
Right.
how do I negotiate that? On one hand, I want to share things freely, but there are other creations of mine that I want to monetize. And I think people might get angry if they become accustomed to me sharing my art with them for free, and they think all of a sudden now I'm not going to share any art with them unless they pay me.
Right. No, it is one of those things, and I can totally feel where that people are coming from. Because, like I said, when I started out, as an artist. When I first started out, it was just like getting those contracts was like you really had to like scrape around and send so many emails. And I was fortunate after a while um to get a good base of people I was working with, but like it was not easy, and there was no one place for me to go to sort of, work with a lot of companies and just say like, okay, I'm done with this thing now, I'm gonna go over here.
In your work, how much autodidacticism was required? By that I mean, how much of what you do had to be self-taught and couldn't be learned from anyone else? And how much did you learn from teachers? I mean,
By the time I got to, sorry, you cut out there for a second. By the time I got to college, they were pretty much like, you don't really need to be here, so just kind of work on your stuff in the back and don't make too much noise. Because I just like, I didn't, I was actually asked to come back and teach the class next year, but I didn't. They were like, you could teach this course, and I'm like, I don't really want to, but thank you. But yeah, like I mostly was self-taught, and I honestly feel like I learned more from a magazine called Imagine FX than I did in school. So it just, when you're specialized, it's just like it's really hard to get taught certain things. It's like if you go into animation for games, it's not necessarily the same as for movies or, even the web and things like that. So you want to be as versatile as possible, but at the same time, if you want a specialization, you will probably be doing that specialization on your own.
you know, when I see your tweets and you're talking about how your day is going, it makes me think about mad inventors tinkering alone in their makeshift laboratories. So, how much of what you do you have to do alone? And when I say that, I don't mean, what I mean is when I say alone, I mean, how how many hours do you spend physically alone without other people in the immediate vicinity distracting you?
Well, I mean, I've got one or two people around me during the day, but I'm mostly by myself in my work, so it's not too bad. I get used to working at home with like four other people in the house anyway, but so I'm just like not, it doesn't even bother me anymore. I do like the quiet, but I still, even then, I have some background noise, so it's not too bad.
Well, actually, you give me hope because, when I was in school, I often liked to be alone. And some very know-it-all teachers would come to me and they would say, you like to think you're so ambitious, but if you want to be this big success in business like you say you are, you have to always be around people. You should never eat lunch alone. You should always be networking. You have to be the sort who slaps other people on the back, especially if you don't like that sort of thing. And they say you can't succeed in business as a loner. And I worried, what if they're right?
You honestly are better off with a very small network of good people than just everyone. The kind of people that need to be friends with everyone to make it in business are the kind of people most of us probably wouldn't want to have our back turned to. I do like talking to a lot of people now, but I never like in my actual work, in person and stuff like that. No, I'm pretty quiet. I can go for days without talking, especially because like my voice will cut out and I'll just like lose my voice for a couple of days. So I'm pretty used to not talking for days. I don't necessarily, and the thing is, that's another thing with these sort of collaborative contract systems is that you don't, you might be the most talented artist on the planet, but you might not be able to talk to people. You may not, and like, yes, for some people there are therapies for some of those things, but at the same time, it's like some of us just don't don't like to be up people's butts asking for work all the time. We just don't. We want our work to speak for itself and have a chance, and to have a place where you can be like, you know, and like I said, I tried to set one of these up myself. It's not like I want to just cop out to another company, but at the same time, it's like you can't beat that distribution. You know, you will, if you get on Steam, even as like a Steam Workshop store, I guarantee you would make 10 times more than just selling it yourself. So, you know, it's just, if you want to sell your lemonade in somebody else's store, you kind of got to pay a little fee for that. I mean, that's just kind of how it works.
You know, that reminds me of another thing. When I read your tweets, you know, I think, wow, she's very economically literate. I mean, how do you get interested in all these matters of economy?
When I was 14, I think I had economics, and then I took one later in entrepreneurship, but it really opened my eyes to some things that my parents would say things to me, and I was just like, that doesn't make sense. You know, just like, how does that work? Like, I think my family wanted to shield me from some of the economic stuff, which made me curious about it, oddly enough, and I wanted to know, you know, like, how do budgets work? How does money work? How do you save money? How do you spend it? How do other people spend money? Those kinds of things. And I had a really good teacher, and he came up to me, you know, my graduation was basically like, you know, whatever you do, you're going to do well because you care to do well. And I don't know, that just always stuck with me, and I always just kept an interest in economics because nobody had ever explained the world to me the way that he did. So it was just like, it just made sense to keep up on those things. And, you know, some people try to make it seem like economics is treating people like math, but I think it's using math to show how people behave under certain situations. Like, what do people do when things are scarce? What do people do when there's too much, you know? And even now we're actually combining, you know, economics and biology, and coming up with concepts like biohistory, which is basically, why do some civilizations have this kind of an economy and why do other civilizations have this kind of economy? What worked, what didn't? Is this based on the environment? Is it genetics? Is this something that happens as a consequence of, you know, a couple of bad people ruling over a lot of people? Or, you know, is it mob rule? Like, what causes those things to happen?
Well,
And
I
I
know.
think that
What do you think?
I think that if more people actually understood economics, we would have a lot less issues, because we tend to have this thing where we're just like, the easiest way out is to say, I'm in this situation because somebody else is taking too much. And that's true in some cases, but it's also true that, you know, people, here's a big one that gets me, is people will always say stuff like, oh, you know, poor people just don't know how to budget. They're actually really good budgeters. They're too good. That's the problem, is that they know exactly how much time and money they have, and they micromanage it. And some of it is not their fault. It's not. We have a lot of economic systems in place that we think are helping people, but they're actually making them worse, because we get people onto a system, and then if they make $100 too much, we rip that system out from under them. So, like, that is an economic problem as well. Like, we aren't considering what works. We're like, well, no, we shouldn't worry about them being educated and doing better. We should just give them more. And it's like, okay, but you're saying give them more, but then you're also saying that if they get to XYZ amount, we should just cut them off and not give them padding or space in between transition education. Like, it's just like, it's almost like they just want the problem to go away. And that goes for everyone. I'm not saying, you know, like one group or another is just like, you know, it's a lot of them.
I remember you tweeted a quotation from a famous economics writer, Frederick Bastiat, about how there's a paradox in people saying there's a paradox when people say human beings are so irresponsible, they need the state to dictate
Right.
what manage them. There's a paradox because what is the state? Those very same people. If people can't govern themselves, how can they govern others through the power of the state?
Exactly. That's
Are you
very
a fan
true.
of paradoxians?
Very much so. There are a few things I think because we're such a big society now and there's not exactly one-to-one jobs for everyone that we do have to make some concessions. And I mean, like, obviously you need to look after your disabled, your elderly and things like that. Like, you can't just leave people to die in the street. You know, that's like, for some reason, like, I'm somewhat of a lowercase libertarian. I'm more of like a conservative libertarian. But at the same time, people are always like, but my roads and, elderly people and disabled people. I'm like, I'm disabled. I get it. Okay. Like, I get it. But I think that the way that we tend to look after people is to remove the expectation from their community and their family and to put it onto people that don't know them and don't have a vested interest in their well-being. Like, I worked with some programs that were about, teaching people with Down syndrome to interact with the community and to use services and things like that. And like, it was so sad because you would find out that as soon as those people hit 18 and started getting disability checks, their family would move away and leave them there. And
Well,
I just, yeah.
seconds left. Is there anything really short? Any
Oh,
advice
sorry.
you give to the gaming community?
If you want to get into game development, just read economics and don't forego marketing and economics because they're not nice words.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for letting me interview you. And thank you to our viewers for watching. And we hope to bring you more good content in the future. Thank you. Again, thank you, Jennifer.
Oh, you're welcome.